This moral crisis, I'd also say it's a spiritual crisis in America today, all around the world. This gap between the rich and everybody else is reaching critical proportions. And I think one of the biggest crises is the young people. Today's young unemployed become tomorrow's unemployable. They lose valuable jobs, training skills. So I'm going to show, since a picture's worth 1,000 words, I'll just show you some pictures about how rapidly this inequality, as well as opportunity inequality, is growing. So what's happening in America today, savers are losers. You know, most parents say to their kids, go to school and save money and work hard. But in 1970, when I graduated from school, $1 million at 15% interest earned me $150,000 a year. Now, you could live on $150,000 a year back then. But in 2016, due to this thing called quantitative easing, I call it the Greenspan put, it's $1 million at negative 5 basis points. It's going to cost you $1 million to save $1 million. That is how deteriorated our financial systems have become. And this is one of the causes between the gap between the rich and the poor. The other thing is that fewer and fewer families are receiving middle-class incomes. It's going down. Every time we shop at Walmart, we ship dollars and jobs over to China and Pakistan and all the other countries. That's capitalism. The other thing that's happening when people's incomes go down, they become dependent. Now, the US government tells us that poverty has been beaten in America. Well, maybe poverty has been beaten, but what has increased is the entitlement mentality. The attitude that the government and other people should take care of me. As I said, it's a moral crisis as well as a spiritual crisis. You know, I learned in Sunday school, give and you shall receive. And too many people today think they should receive. This is the other crisis here, is Social Security. Being Japanese, the Japanese call it, Social Security. I'm a racist, I know. But anyway, I've met so many people my age. There's about 75 million baby boomers. I'm at the top of the baby boom chain. We expect the government to take care of us. That's a lot of highly educated people. That is a crisis. So in 2002, I published this book, Rich Dad's Prophecy. 14 years later, the prediction was that 2016, there'd be a global financial crash. We're in 2016. And here we are in 2016. You can see it coming. In the first 10 years of this century, we have had 3 major crashes. In 2000 was the dot-com crash, followed by the 2006 real estate subprime crash, and then 2008, the banking crash. The question is this next? This is the giant crash of 1929. And every time I listen to those guys on CNBC, I call it bubble vision, they keep talking about the giant crash of 1929. I tell you what, it doesn't even compare to this one coming, you know? So that's why I write and I speak, and I'm very concerned about our futures, our well-being, and the state of the economy. So I'm going to be talking today about why the rich are getting richer. Commercial message, my next book coming out. But I'll explain some of the tricks of the trade, why guys like me get richer and everybody else is not. And this is quite interesting. This is one of the reasons the rich are getting richer. These are the Bush tax cuts. The biggest tax cuts goes to the top 0.1%. Thank you, George. I appreciate that. You know, they have no morals, those guys, man, I tell you. But anyway, I'm the author of the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Never see a show of hands. How many have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Oh, good. Some of you have. Who has not yet read the book here? Oh, good. There's some customers out there. I'm happy to see that. You know, as I say to the press, I'm a best-selling author. I'm not a best-writing author. But anyway, so for those that have read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's a true story with my 2 dads. And the story begins when I was 9 years old, growing up in a little town, a little sugar plantation town called Hawaii. And I raised my hand in the 4th grade, and I went to a very rich, basically all-white school. And I said, Mrs. Gerald, when will I learn about money? And she says, money? Don't you know the love of money is the root of all evil? I said, not to me. But I tell you, and she says, you're here to get a job. I said, no, I don't want a job. I just want to get rich. So she says, go ask your dad. So that's where Rich Dad, Poor Dad started. And my poor dad was the head of education for Hawaii, very smart man, PhD, went to Stanford, University of Chicago, Northwestern. And I went home and I asked Dad, I said, hey, Dad, when are we going to learn about money? And he says, never. I said, why not? So the government doesn't allow us to teach you that. I said, that's kind of interesting. So he said, if you want to get rich, go talk to your best friend's father. And he is an entrepreneur, and someday he'll be a very rich man. So that's how the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad starts. When I was 9 years old, I went to my rich dad's office, being an entrepreneur, and he started teaching his son and me about why the rich get richer. And that's my financial education began. So I wrote this book. It came out in 1997. So far, it's sold about 41 million copies in 50 languages throughout the world. So I'll give a little bit of my background, I think. I don't do it for the applause. It's send the cash. But anyway. Anyway, this is Hilo, Hawaii to New York City. I didn't do well in school. I was a straight C- student. But I did. And having the old man as the head of education wasn't easy, you know. So anyway, I got 2 congressional nominations, one to U.S. Naval Academy, Annapolis, Maryland, one to U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, New York. So I took New York because we're the highest paid graduates in the world. And this is me at Kings Point here. And our starting salaries for most of us was about $100,000 a year back in 1965. So that was pretty good back then. Not much today, but it's pretty good back then. And then when I graduated, I got a job as a 3rd officer on Standard Oil tankers sailing the world. And it was a great job, except for one thing. The Vietnam War was still on, and my moral conscience kind of got to me, and I said, maybe I should go fight a war. So I joined the Marine Corps, and I took a cut in pay from about $6,000 a month down to $200 a month as a Marine lieutenant. And it was a great decision. I went to flight school in Florida, Pensacola, and I was right up the street here at Camp Pendleton, and straight to Vietnam. And it was really a great experience. Loved the Marine Corps, loved the guys I worked with. And it's a band of brothers, very spiritual organization. And when I came back, that's when my business career started. It's my first business, the surfer wallet business and all this. And everybody thinks, yeah, when you start getting successful, life's easy. Well, no, success is expensive. You know, I started selling these silly wallets, and all of a sudden they took off. And I spent more time raising capital to buy more inventory so I could sell more. But it was a great learning experience. I learned to make a lot of money selling wallets. But anyway, my life changed when I met this man here, Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller. This here is what Fuller is noted for. He's considered a futurist and a friendly genius. This is a geodesic dome, which was at the Montreal World's Fair in 1967. So in 1967, I hitchhiked from New York City all the way to Montreal to go see the dome, and it was a mind-blowing experience. I never thought I'd ever meet the great genius. You know, John Denver calls him the planet's friendly genius. So anyway, but in 1981, I had a chance to study with him up in Kirkwood, California, near Lake Tahoe for 5 days. And I made the mistake of sitting down next to, well, he sat down next to me, really. And it was called the Future of Business Seminar. And he sits down next to me. He says, Robert, what is your life's purpose? What is your mission in life? I said, oh, to get rich. Wrong answer. He chewed me out. He says, it's a waste of a good mind. You know, it says, why don't you do something to change the world? I said, change the world? I just want to get rich, you know. And finally, I got it. As he says, you know, I'm not here to work for me. I'm here to work for everybody else. And it was a pretty cathartic event once I realized how greedy I was. Then I studied with him for 3 years. And every time he kept asking the same question that he asked himself, what can I do? I'm just a little guy. What can I do? I'm just a little guy. He was tiny, too. So I ask all of you, what can you do? We're just little people in many ways. So I studied with him for 3 times, 81, 82, and 83. And then he passed away on July 1st, 1983. And he left this book behind, was called the Grunch of Giants. It stands for Gross Universal Cashites, Grunch. It's how the ultra-rich rip us off. Now, Fuller is a friendly genius. He never wrote finance books or economic books. He's math, science, art, design. He's an architect. I read Grunch of Giants and understood it because it's exactly what my rich dad was telling me. The rich are ripping us off. So at that point, I said, what can I do? I'm just a little guy. And I decided at that time I would take on grunge. And for those of you who wonder who grunge is, you may just notice that those crashes we just had, we got bailed out. The rich got bailed out. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Bernanke and the president and Paulson stand up there and they say, this was a mistake. We had to